Welcome to The Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong-Alfares with the news from the global economy. On today's show, the BDS movement grows after the Gaza war, Argentina's third default in 25 years, and how a new project safeguards the Kenyan environment. First, the headlines. U.S. President Barack Obama on Tuesday said U.S. companies would invest $14 billion in Africa in construction, clean energy, banking, and information technology projects. Blackstone will invest in energy projects. Coca-Cola will provide clean water. GE will create infrastructure. And Marriott will build more hotels, Obama said. But as the U.S. seeks to seize opportunities in Africa, home to 6 of the world's 10 fastest-growing economies, they lag far behind China and Europe. And since the shale revolution in the U.S., oil imports, the country's main trade link to Africa, have fallen to a 40-year low.
Africa needs capital. In some cases, Africa needs technical assistance. Africa certainly needs access to markets. But perhaps the biggest thing that Africa is going to need to unleash even more the potential that's already there and the growth that's already taking place is laws and regulations and structures that empower individuals and are not simply designed to control or empower those at the very top.
European stocks slid for the 5th time in 6 days on Wednesday as a buildup of Russian armed forces along the border with Ukraine escalated tension. The Stoxx Europe 600 index dropped 0.6% in early trade in London, extending its decline from a 6-year high on June 10th. U.S. stocks also shifted downwards as the S&P 500 fell 1% on Tuesday, leaving it 3.4% down from its recent record closing high. The U.S. equity benchmark fell 2.7% last week, its worst showing in more than 2 years. Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered his government on Tuesday to prepare retaliatory measures against the latest round of Western sanctions. One Russian business newspaper said Moscow may restrict or ban European airlines from flying over Siberia to Asia. The EU and US expanded sanctions restricting access to capital markets for major Russian state-owned banks, as well as targeting Russia's defense and oil sectors. And tightened sanctions against Russia also complicate the country's ability to help former Soviet states refinance international debt payments.
Political instruments of putting pressure on economy, they are unacceptable. They contradict all norms and rules, and in connection with this, the Russian government has already proposed some retaliatory measures to the so-called sanctions imposed by some countries. I think in the current situation, in order to provide with work local producers, we could think about it, but of course this should be done in a very delicate way.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi inaugurated the digging of a new Suez Canal. The new transport channel is being built with a budget of $4 billion and promises to provide 1 million job opportunities. As Egypt teeters on the edge of bankruptcy, the channel project comes at a crucial time. Last month's cut in energy subsidies pushed up prices by more than 70%. And as the World Bank estimates Egyptian unemployment at over 25%, 80% of which are under 30, the threat of political unrest continues to lurk. The Palestinian-sourced BDS movement got a boost from the latest escalation between Hamas and the IDF, which received much negative coverage worldwide. And while peace remains elusive between Israel and Gaza's government, internationally acknowledged as a terrorist entity, calls for boycotting the Jewish state are on the rise. Daniel Roth has the story.
Carnage, massacre, slaughter are all terms becoming more and more common amongst world leaders to describe Israel's operation in Gaza. As the discourse surrounding Israel and Palestine is changing, calls for economic sanctions against Israel grow stronger. The boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, known as BDS, has led these attempts since its launch in 2005 by 171 Palestinian civil society organizations.
The short-term goal is for the bombing to stop, to end the siege on Gaza, to open the borders. And, all of us here are working on boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement to hold Israel accountable for its violations of international law, which is, an end to the occupation and full rights for Palestinians and Israel, and the right to return.
BDS published on its website a comprehensive list of Israeli products to boycott: food, cosmetics, medicines, and in some cases a recommendation to steer clear of products with 729 on the barcode, which indicates a product is made by a company registered in Israel. In recent days, billionaire investor George Soros' investment fund sold shares in SodaStream, divesting an estimated $24 million from the company, which has a factory in the West Bank. In England, The Guardian reports that Deputy PM Nick Clegg wants arms export licenses for Israel suspended. Also, as a reaction to the last month of heavy violence, some countries, such as Bolivia, have taken measures such as revoking visa exemptions for Israelis. For some in these countries, this can mean paying a price.
I have been selling in this area for 15 years, and 80% of the tourists are Israeli. And whether you want to recognize it or not, they are people that bring a lot of money to Bolivia, and not only La Paz. And the situation worries all of us. For this reason, we are getting together tourist agencies and mini-markets, those in the tourism industry, to make the government aware so that it lifts this measure of revoking visa exemptions for Israeli tourists.
Meanwhile, experts are divided about whether a global boycott can take a real economic toll. One cited reason is that Israeli companies are already deeply internationally connected via the high-tech sector, which made up 44% of Israeli goods exported in 2013, according to the Israeli Export Institute. Agree or disagree, more and more people are taking notice of BDS.
And attorney Lior Nauman, partner at S. Horowitz & Co., joins us now for a discussion on efforts by the U.S. government to track bank and financial accounts held by U.S. citizens abroad. Mr. Nauman, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Where does this procedure come from? Why is it necessary?
The U.S. has decided to enforce its tax on Americans that are living all over the world, and has forced Swiss banks to reveal its American clients and pay billions of dollars in fines. So now all the U.S. Americans that live abroad in Israel are paying need to report their accounts.
Just to clarify, I mean, essentially America is the only country, or one of the only countries, that requires all passport holders to pay taxes based on the fact that they are Americans, correct? Irrelevant of where they live.
Correct. Not on a residency basis like all over the world, but just on citizenship basis.
And this has led a lot of Americans to basically, take money out, smuggle it out, and put it in different accounts around the world?
Right. Americans that are living in the U.S. and also Americans that are living out of the U.S. have been hiding their money in Switzerland, in Israel, and other places, and not reporting their taxes to the U.S.
And the reason for discussing this, obviously, is because just a month and a half ago, apparently, Israel essentially complied with this procedure. And from the understanding that January 2015, is it, we're going to see this actually applied in Israel.
Correct. Israel has signed the FACTA agreement with the U.S., which is basically an agreement that the banks here that join the FACTA are required to submit the names and social securities and other of all the Americans, and so all the U.S. people that are hiding money in Israel, all those places that have put the FACTA in place, their name will be turned to the IRS,
and they will probably.
And they'll be
serve in prison if they lie.
If they don't go through a procedure to clean up and pay all their taxes for the last couple of years, they may be imprisoned or prosecuted and pay significant fines.
What's the scope of American measures against banks, say in Switzerland and other places where we've seen this?
The banks that found out that these financial banks in Switzerland have helped Americans hid their money have got agreements with them to pay fines. Credit Suisse has paid almost $2 billion in fines, UBS almost $1 billion, and now they're negotiating also with an Israeli bank, Bank Leumi, for a few hundred millions of dollars of fine.
So what are citizens doing now then? What's the...
What are citizens doing? They are going through a procedure which is called a OVDP, which is a voluntary disclosure procedure, that if a U.S. citizen comes to the IRS before the IRS comes to him, then he can lower his fines there was a few programs. The program that is now being ended is a program that citizens pay 27.5% of their total highest balance of the account as a fine. And now we're looking at 50% of the money in the account if they don't full out with this program.
Okay, well, Attorney Lior Naaman, thank you very much for joining us and for enlightening us about the situation here with FACTA in Israel. Thank you very much. Argentina is stuck in a catch-22 following a U.S. court decision that it must pay holdout creditors in full when it pays creditors that previously agreed to a 70% haircut. But as South America's second largest economy defaults for a third time in 25 years, Argentinians will once again bear the grunt of this decision. Daniel Roth has a story.
For the second time in 13 years on Wednesday, Argentina defaulted on debt owed, according to some. This hit Argentinian stocks hard, dropping 8.5% the following day. A U.S. ruling said that the South American country would have to pay principal plus interest amounting to $1.5 billion to two U.S. hedge funds it owes money to before it can pay on its other debts. The decision, in effect, put the country into default.
From a technical point of view, Argentina is in default because creditors did not get paid before the expiration date. Is it debatable? Yes. There's no doubt that it's quite questionable because the country is not refusing to make payments, but a court decision blocked these payments from reaching the creditors.
The court decision put a block on $539 million worth of Argentinian payments to creditors who had agreed to a new bond deal after the 2001 crisis in Argentina. The Argentinian government has said it aims to continue paying their debts to the nearly 93% of creditors that had agreed to the restructuring in 2005 and 2010, but it is the U.S. government that is blocking them. For many, this means that Argentina is not in fact in default, but instead is being forced into a bad position. And some in Argentina are crying foul.
There is conduct that could be considered as possibly distinct illegal acts that have to do with speculation and creating a maneuver to create a payout process for holders of insurance on Argentinian debt. There will be an investigation of an administrative and criminal character, and we hope that SEC does the same thing and carries out an investigation.
Though it is unclear exactly what the effects will be and how big an impact they will have, the situation is not good for Argentinians.
If Argentina remains in default, the slowdown of economic activity will be greater than we are expecting today. The exchange rate will surely end up higher than what we are now anticipating for the end of the year. The gap will be higher, but that does not mean Argentina will be in crisis or an explosive situation
As it seems that the hedge funds will not agree to new terms and Argentina will not agree to pay, thus far a solution is not in sight.
A pioneering project in Kenya is helping tackle climate change, protecting wildlife and forest, and funding the fight against elephant poaching, all while benefiting local communities. More in this report.
Another dead elephant in Kenya's Tsavo East National Park. As the government deploys more rangers, poachers here are using increasingly sophisticated methods to get around them.
We're also getting more money in the trade, and unfortunately that is fueling the use of more technologies that, such as, in South Africa they're using helicopters and night vision goggles. We're starting to see some of those things used here.
Poaching isn't the only problem here. Farmers and charcoal burners seeking short-term cash have devastated the land with decades of slash-and-burn agriculture.
Climate change is already having an effect here on the local communities. The whole Tsavo ecosystem is a very dry area, so water is always in short supply, but especially now with the effects of climate change, we see that droughts are prolonged, they're more frequent.
However, a pioneering UN-backed project set up by non-profit organisation Wildlife Works is helping prevent climate change and preserve the forests. Farmers can earn carbon credits to exchange for cash by conserving and replanting trees, supporting nearly 100,000 rural Kenyans. The money has helped support projects like tree nurseries as well as anti-poaching schemes.
It is the developed countries that are responsible for the mess. And we continue insisting as developing countries that they must take immediate and drastic steps to correct the problem.
In a deeply poor region, the project earns each person around $270 a year and helps them to see value in the environment. And as well as transforming the lives of the locals, it's hoped it will also protect those of the elephants.
And that's it for us at The Economy Magazine, your daily source for economic and financial reports at I24 News. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares. Follow me on Twitter at Chong Alfares. Send us your comments via the feedback link at the bottom of our page at www.i24news.tv. And stay tuned for more on the economy tomorrow. Thank you very much for watching.